Welcome to All Things Flamingo podcast with the Flamingo Group and myself, Beth Reilly. Join us as we discuss all things to do with our community, real estate, and all things Flamingo. Welcome and tune in for a flocking good time. Well, hello. Today I get the privilege of speaking to Karina Dunford, and she is a high fashion model that's left the fine home of Minnesota and gone to the Big Apple, New York City, and is going to make it in high fashion. Hi, Karina. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for taking this opportunity to meet with us. You and I had met, and then I had a million questions afterwards because being from this part of the country, we really don't we don't engage in high fashion. Let's put it that way. And so it was really interesting to learn about your journey and your commitment to, taking off and doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a big change, but, moving from Minneapolis to the Big Apple, why not?
Mm-hmm. Why not? It's a little bit better. Well, it's not as cold. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
It's wet. Sure. It's pretty wet there, though.
It's been raining. It's been a little windier, actually, than I'm used to, but I think that could also be just kind of the wind tunnels that create when buildings are kind of closer together.
Mm-hmm. And are you actually in Manhattan itself, or
no? So I live in Brooklyn. I live in the area of Brooklyn called Bushwick. It's about 45 minutes by train to get to like Times Square.
Okay.
Which honestly, I mean, traveling by train, it goes by really fast. I sort of equate it to, you can actually hear the train running past right now.
Yeah.
I sort of equate it to like air travel. It kind of, a lot of the process is what takes up most of the time. But once you're actually on the train, it goes by pretty quickly.
Yeah, I like to download books. I mean, I listen to books all the time, podcasts, stuff like that. So I'm sure you're doing the same thing I can't read, but I can listen.
Motion sick.
Yeah, I just can't have my head down doing that the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell me a little bit about how you started to determine like, hey, I better do this now? Kind of your process behind getting involved with high fashion and wanting to model. Besides being physically, of course, you have to have a certain type of physique and everything to be able to be an actual model.
Sure. Well, so I took a fascination in modeling after the pandemic. I sort of just decided that I wanted to do something for myself. So I was in college. I was at the University of Minnesota studying developmental psychology, and I was actually pre-med. And so the goal was med school, and the goal had been med school ever since I was in high school, was, go to college, then med school. But there was a time during the pandemic where I really started to kind of not lose focus of that, but more gain a focus of doing things for myself and really just spending time exploring and living life while I can, while I'm young. And so I just decided to kind of take that leap, and I applied to be scouted by my mother agency, Karen Models in Minneapolis. And I did that by just having my roommates help me just set up like some really good lighting. There were 4 of them flashing their bright flashlights from their phones on me, taking different angles of photos so we could submit something that looked semi-decent. But the online portfolio, or at least the online submission, they're pretty direct about what kind of photos they're expecting, like no makeup, this kind of lighting. Yeah. So when they're called digitals.
Okay.
And it's basically like your blank slate. So like, what do you look like? What do you look like right now? Here's an updated digital, and it shows like proportions, your body shape, your body type, and then also just, a good clean like headshot to kind of give the agencies a sense of, hey, this is what you got to work with.
Oof, that is tough. You better like yourself a lot in order to get into this industry and to, hack it. I think that's a really tough thing to do.
I think some of it is a lot of just, snap and pray. I think that you don't always know whether or not, your opinion of the photograph is what somebody could do with it. You know, I've had photos where I look at it, I'm like, oh, it's not really my favorite. And then I see it in a different, you know, they come back from edit or from post edit and they actually look a lot better. And that has nothing to do with retouching. It just has to do with, you know, difference in like lighting and shading and stuff like that.
Interesting. I've seen quite a bit of your, well, I've seen a few of your different photos and I'm like, oh, that I can see sometimes how there's almost a branding in modeling. Is that fair to say?
I definitely think it's fair to say when it comes to what type of model you want to be, because there are different types of models. Like for me specifically, I'd like to be a high fashion model. You know,
Right.
my aspirations, you know, my absolute like I've peaked as a model, kind of reached those goals would be modeling in, you know, high fashion campaigns for Prada, Gucci, Dolce & Gabbana, Valentino. Like that would be success to me as a model.
Would it be runway or photo? Both. I'm not sure.
It would, I mean, both.
Yeah.
So modeling is definitely, you know, it's an older sort of industry compared to how a lot of people portray themselves nowadays, compared to like influencers or on Instagram. Right. But modeling, actually, runway pays probably the least in terms of jobs. So having a print campaign would be more lucrative in that sense.
Right.
But being in a runway show and as a high fashion model is extremely, extremely fortunate. And that would be something that I would be very proud to do.
It's kind of the exciting or the just, you know, the endorphin filled side of the industry.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of rush, you know, you're backstage and there are 4 people, you know, helping you take off your garments and you're standing there half naked, putting on different things and you're running out. And yeah, it's very fast paced and like you said, high endorphins, but it's also high reward. Like it's sort of like riding a roller coaster.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a good, yeah. I mean, if I were to do something or if I had any interest in that, well, that wasn't, I don't have the build. So mind you, that's not it. But it is interesting because it is such a small percentage of the population that can do it. Let's put it that way. You know, so when I see it, it's all, to me, it's something a little bit out of this world. Now, fashion itself, I think, that's different. That's more art and, you know, you can get into that in different ways too. Have you ever thought beyond this, like this is right now what you're doing with the modeling and, you know, the walkways, doing all of that. Do you ever see yourself graduating into anything else in the fashion industry? Are you interested in style line? I'm sure you are, but they could make a living at it.
Absolutely.
Because you have like a window. Don't you have a window of how many years would you say that a high fashion model survives?
I mean, you never know. I mean, we still have supermodels who are working today. I mean, I'm pretty sure Naomi Campbell, she's still a working model.
Mm-hmm.
Giselle is still working. She's still, you know, booking things. And then they all of a sudden now Vogue did the greatest of all time, you know, their All Stars cover. And so Linda Evangelista, she came back and all these, they're still considered to be working if they're booking campaigns. And Cindy Crawford, she's still working.
Yeah, so I really in the industry. Doesn't she have product? A lot of them have their own products. Doesn't Cindy Crawford have a line?
I believe so. A lot of times they end up like having their own, you know, like lingerie or jewelry line or a fashion line or things like that. I know that Naomi Campbell, she does Pretty Little Thing, which is a clothing line she came out with. But I think that just goes to show that you can grow within the industry. Like you said, that there is room to grow, but that doesn't mean that you can't be a working model at the same time. I think it's just like anything where there are actors who own real estate, you know, how it just is a good business sense, you know?
Right. Right. So they can move into different parts of the industry itself. So when we talked before, I was like, geez, now I have all sorts of different questions for you. I mean, we had our initial interview, but like here, these are great measurements for you, Karina. I mean, wow, 5 foot, well, almost 5'11".
I actually did get measured today. I had 2 go-sees for New York agencies here in New York, and they whip out the measuring tape. They whip out the, to see how, so I am actually 5'11", which is good. And then the other measurements there are correct, which I was very happy about.
Yeah, hang on. Well, if anything, if you want to get taller, I guess Pilates will help you do that.
Yeah, I mean,
I've heard people do that too. So
there's a range that they sort of look for with runway models, and I'm just at the cusp. Like anything over 6 foot, I think maybe like 6'1" or 2" is too tall for women, but they look for like 5'9" to 6 foot.
Wow. Again, a very small margin of people can be put into that slot. Did you get the job or?
So go-sees work sort of like a job interview, where I had the go-sees today, and then I'm just waiting to hear back to see if there's anything lucrative that comes from it. But the lucrative meaning that I hopefully would sign with them and be able to work in New York.
Yes. Okay. My thoughts are with you.
Thank you.
Do they like having the Midwestern model? Like people will tell me they get their teaching degree and they go to California, they go down south, they are many times sought after because of the, we kind of have that farm roots, hardworking, show up type of mentality. Do you hear any of that in the industry?
I don't actually, because the comments that I'm giving are, I wouldn't have guessed that you were from out of town. You acclimate super well. And I think it just has to do with how well traveled I am. But I think that the kind of, hardworking, that showing up on time, being prepared, I think that that's a common thing that they have here as well. I think the only difference would be, the sort of Minnesota nice, like sort of passive aggressive kind of mentality that they don't have here. And frankly, I didn't as well, which was why I was so excited to move to New York, to sort of be with those who have the same honest sort of.
Well, say it like it is. I don't want to sit and try and figure it out. I'm not from Minnesota, I'm from Wisconsin, but that's a thing where I can sit and I'll be like, I don't get it. My husband's from Minnesota, so I'll have a long what did that mean? Did I miss something? Like I'm gone. So I don't know. It's a thing.
Yeah. I think it really is just everybody trying not to hurt anybody's feelings. But, in the long run, it's, what does it matter? Because people find out anyways, kind of a thing. But
that's funny. When you look at I've been looking at all of this. The other thing I noticed is there are shows that are trying to incorporate high fashion. Like they're trying to incorporate. Have you ever seen Selling Sunset?
No, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the women all there, and I'm like, okay, they can wear high fashion. Women on that show. And I think they're trying to incorporate high fashion and high real estate. I think that's the show's one big fantasy, then there's all the other stuff that's kind of catty and I'm not into that, but I like the rest of it. It's like, holy cow, check out that house. Oh, that's a cool outfit, So you kind of get both worlds. I think that they're trying to make fashion something that you can see besides Instagram. Instagram doesn't usually have women of your build on there. They have many times small, everything looks good on them, but it doesn't have the same high fashion flavor.
Well, I like to say that a really good example of the difference between a high fashion model and an Instagram model is Kendall Jenner and her sister Kylie. Kendall Jenner is a high fashion model. I mean, she's one of the highest paid models in the world at one point. She works runways, she works campaigns, she is a spokesperson for, I think it's either Maybelline or Lancome Paris now. And and then Kylie is more of the Instagram model, and there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, she's
probably making just fine money on that.
I mean, if not more, it can be even more lucrative because of brand deals and the commission you can actually make off of products and things like that, versus models in high fashion, it doesn't really matter how much of a lipstick sells. Like, I'm not making any royalties
Not
off of
getting a
it.
commission, right?
No. So
That's
there's difference in that. And so there's pros and cons to both. I think it really just goes to, you know, what do you want to do? What kind of model do you want to be? And there's no wrong, you know, answer to that. It's just, it's going to be different for everybody.
Well, and everybody has to eat, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of have to know where you're going to go and where you're going to fit in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've always wanted to ask a model is, do you cringe when you see somebody with horrible fashion? Like the other day, I saw somebody sitting there with a plaid shirt on, and they had these like fancy dangly earrings. And I mean, the plaid shirt was buttoned all the way up. I was like, this is hideous. But I'm just wondering, somebody who touches it as much as you do you ever find yourself going, oh?
I don't think so much. I think everybody has that sort of initial kind of gut, you know, reaction of like shock, because it's not something that we're expecting.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it kind of, the second thought in our heads is what matters the most. Like, that really reflects who we are as people. And I like to focus on well, you know what? If they think they look good, it's the confidence that really sells it. So if someone is confident enough to go out in something like that, then more power to them. I personally wouldn't, and they might be breaking some, you know, fashion etiquette rules, but life is too short. You know, if you don't want to play the game, you don't have to.
Right. Okay. It was funny though, because I remember my girlfriends that were really into fashion.
Sure.
And I kind of needed some coaching. You know, I was like, yeah, you might not want to wear that with that. You know what I mean? And I could tell they were shaking on the inside, but they were very kind to me. So I was happy about that. Do the shoes ever get easier to wear? This is something we talked about offline,
Yes.
but what is that?
Yes, they do, in the sense that, I mean, heels still hurt. They're not great to walk in. I was in a pair of heels for, what was it, from 9 a.m. until noon, and then 1:30 until 4:30. So like for solid like stretches, it was probably like 8 hours that I was in a pair of heels just standing. Like, there were no sitting breaks. It was just stand around. And it hurts. You know, you're definitely like, your feet get warm, they expand, the whole, you know, you start to get blisters. Like, it still happens. You just sort of learn ways to cope with it. There are special cushions you can put in your shoes. There are special, or, you know, I'm not going to wear my 8-inch stilettos if I'm walking around downtown Manhattan all day. Like, I'm not going to do that. Will I bring them in my bag if I need them for the outfit I'm wearing? Maybe. But those are the things that you learn. But you do learn how to walk in heels properly the more you practice in them, and then they hurt less.
Balance.
Yeah.
That's where good abs help too, I would think, because that's your balance. And
it actually is a lot of core. You actually, like, with there's a skill to runway walking and learning how to walk in heels properly. And so part of that is leading with your core strength, you know, or strengthened and tightened, and
standing upright. But they always seem to throw their hips out. I was like, I don't get it, because
there's a natural swing that comes to it when you're walking with a runway walk. But if you look at it, really just depends. A lot of times, some of the show's producers will say that they want more attitude. Sometimes they don't. Mm-hmm. So if you look at, you know, Chanel in the spring versus, you know, Victoria's Secret, like, they're going to have different walks. And it's because, just like you said earlier, there's a different brand. And so it all matters.
So the other thing, of course, is always weight. So I'm always wondering, like, what are some of the tricks of the trade? I know tricks of the trade. Let's face it. We all know it's 80-20 on diet. It's what you eat, right? But what are some of the tricks of the trade? 'Cause you guys have you have to be incredibly small. I mean, it's like one flaming Cheeto and that's it. That's lunch, is what I always think when I see the models. Also, you're in great shape. You don't look ill at all. Sometimes I think they're bigger bone gals like myself, and then they just have like a lot of points, and you don't have all the points showing up, like you're naturally built smaller.
Yeah, and I do think it has to do with body type. I mean, everybody's different in terms of rates of metabolism, and that has a lot to do with it as well. I will say that it's really just a mindset that you have to sort of be aware of consistently, because if you're just eating one, flaming hot Cheeto a day for lunch and that's your only meal, like obviously you're going to starve, and that's not healthy. But if I decide that I want to have a snack as, a small bag of flaming hot Cheetos, that's fine. And I can have that every once in a while, but it's a mindset of, okay, well, what else am I putting into my body then for the rest of the day? Because if I'm only eating bags of flaming hot Cheetos, then that's obviously not good for me. And it's obviously not good for my goal. So that has something to do with it as well.
Well, I think it's definitely a discipline.
Yeah, it's an everyday thought, but it's also a fine line between being conscious of health versus, illness, because it can be a really slippery road for some people who are not in the most confident places in their lives of your body's going to shift weight every day. I mean, I can shift upwards of like 5 to 6 pounds sometimes in a day, depending on when, you weigh yourself, you get up in the morning, go to the bathroom, you're obviously going to weigh the least in the day compared to eating some food. But the main thing right now in modeling is actually measurements and being within like a certain like ratio, because I've been doing this for about 2 years now, and I have yet to have anybody tell me like, oh, you need to lose weight, or or even asking me how much I weigh. It's not even on my comp card. It's not something that people ask me. People are asking me for my measurements. So they're asking me for my bust, my waist, and my hips.
So you're a true size is what they're looking for, so that you would fit the clothes a certain way.
Right.
Okay. So that's just a ratio thing. If you're 5'11" and you're sort of a size 2 body, cool. Mm-hmm. Then the clothes will fit really well on that frame.
Right. So I think it's easier than looking for a weight, because, having to do the math of, well, if someone's 6'2" and they weigh 116 pounds, like those measurements could be anywhere. They could have, 38-inch hips still, and because they could be carrying all of that, weight that they don't have in their butt. Mm-hmm. And have nothing in their, and then have an equal waist. So the measurements is really what the focus has been. And now shifting into even more like accessible modeling and diverse modeling is that the ratio is the same. So I had a mentor named Grant Whitaker in Minneapolis, who is a really big producer, and he's pushing for a lot of high fashion to come back to the Twin Cities. He produced Fashionopolis. He's really amazing. He was the one that had always told us, like you can model at any size as long as your measurements are where they're supposed to be.
Okay. Interesting. That's a good coach, because then you're right that the clothes will fall the best under those frames.
Yeah, exactly.
So now a lot of times when we were talking to is that you could run all over the place doing all sorts of different types of modeling, but time is really money for you. And what are the things that you need to focus on to kind of push your career as quickly as possible, I think is what we were gearing towards.
Sure. So I think initially in the beginning, you want as much exposure and experience as possible, just because getting time in front of the camera is really the only way to get comfortable with it and learn how your body moves, how your body, reacts. Because sometimes we think we're doing one thing and we look in the mirror and it looks totally different. So a lot of times it's that practice, that experience that really helps. And those test shoots are ways to build your book as well, to build your portfolio. But as you start advancing, as you start getting, more comfortable about, what my experience level is at, or sort of what are your goals as a model, like, hey, this is something I do want to, proceed in. This is something goals I have that I want to accomplish. having standards for yourself is really important, of not just saying yes to everybody that slides into your DMs and wants to shoot with you. You know, it could be your brother's best friend's younger cousin who is all of a sudden a photographer and thinks you're so beautiful and wants to take your picture. And yeah, that's flattering. But, you know, if you actually want to model and you want to see some success, your time is valuable and your time is, you know, your money. So
you really have to study your photographers and who you're going to work with and where you're going to spend your time. And I'm sure they study you too.
Right. Because not everybody will offer to shoot with you. Some people might just send their rates your way. And that's always kind of, you know, okay, I can take a pause, maybe kind of circle back around a little bit later so we can kind of try this again. But it really is, you know, you have to know who is going to help you achieve the goals that you want to and develop your portfolio, because you doing somebody a favor to help them build theirs, but you realize that the photos you get back aren't really stellar. To me, that's a waste of your time.
Yeah, I can see that. So social media for you would be what exactly? Is it much more of just a static page so they know who you are? Or is it still a front for people to talk to you, like give you direct messages or DM? And
it's definitely both. It's been the main communication for me to find photographers, especially here in New York City and in Minneapolis. I mean, everywhere so far. You basically have to network. I mean, you have to get to know people. That's the only way that you can sort of get these, you know, test shoots and be working and have that experience, is by talking to people. And, you know, it's not just, hey, I'd like to shoot with you sometime, because of course,
who has that kind of time and money? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. And they might, in that situation, just send you their rates. And unfortunately, if you're a working model, especially in the beginning, you're not going to be able to spend $500 to $800 for every shoot to get, you know, quality photos. So a lot of it is networking, building relationships, you know, learning what do you appreciate about their photos? Like, why do you want to shoot with them? And let them know. That's something that people always appreciate. But otherwise, Instagram is definitely the main source of social media for, at least for me, for modeling. I don't do TikTok. I think that's more of an influencer thing. I think people can do both, but it just, for me, it's just not really my thing.
Well, and plus you're in a medium that is, you know, photographically driven, which is Instagram. So TikTok's more short video.
Well, and I think that TikTok there are a lot of really amazing models who make TikToks who show that this is an accessible career for people. You know, you don't have to, you know, like sharing some of the industry secrets, or here are tips and tricks, or here are some of the open casting calls that are happening this week. And there's a lot of information that's being shared for the good, which is amazing. But again, it's just not something that I'm really interested or passionate about creating like myself. But Instagram is a really, really amazing way for people to just see kind of your personality, but also how you interact with others, and then any photos that you might have that aren't on your book.
Interesting.
Online in your portfolio.
Because TikTok's blowing up for a lot of realtors, and I'm like, I don't get it. You know, they show pretty houses and stuff like that, but you know, it's also it's a visual industry. But you also have to have somewhat of a personality too.
Absolutely.
So that can I work with this person or can't I? And I think that's still true for any kind of work environment. You still want to be a good person to work with, that you keep all the creative juices going.
I think people appreciate people who like to have fun.
Yeah.
And I think that TikTok really can showcase that.
Yeah.
You know, of, hey, you're relatable. And yeah, I think that Instagram for a long time hasn't really showed that.
Yeah, well, especially with all the filters and stuff, it's like, that's not relatable.
Yeah.
You know, it's just not.
None of the photos I don't post anything with any filters. I don't think it's, you know, at least nothing that's like, besides like maybe like a tint to the screen, but there are filters that will change the entire shape of your face.
That's what you were telling me, like even your jawline.
Hmm. There are ones that will make me think that my jawline needs to be smaller, and I'm like, you know what?
We'll
No.
just we'll just keep going with what I got. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I
and
feel like it would make me really insecure. If I
yeah,
started with those filters, I would be like, oh man, I look 35 again.
yeah, and
Like, well, that's not really my brand. So
it's not realistic, and I think that's what, there's beauty in everything and everyone, and I think that that's just kind of a toxic part of the industry and of social media, is trying to portray like what's not realistic, because that's the only way beauty can be achieved.
it's really affecting many areas of our lives right now. And the people that I've found are the healthiest are the ones that are kind of staying away from it.
Yes.
So it
I've
cools.
definitely found the same. I think that you have to be confident in a lack of comparison, because as soon as you start to compare, you've lost.
Yep. And the algorithms themselves, even just scrolling creates comparison. I don't know how you can't
Right.
in those mediums, but they play their role. I mean, they play a part. It's just I find myself a lot happier staying minimizing it, you know.
Sure.
She just put this up, was your journey to modeling. This is my favorite picture of yours.
Thank
I just
you.
think that yeah, I think that's kind of your brand right there, just sort of the lace, and I don't know if it's leather or not, but I thought that was a yeah, that kept
That was
very pop.
actually, that was
Yeah.
actually Evelyn Therese. She's in Minneapolis. She's Brazilian and she's a photographer. She's phenomenal. She just puts like these most absolutely amazing productions together. She actually let me keep that dress, which was really nice of her. She didn't have to let me do that. But it was one of those of, oh, it just looks so good on you, and it felt so good, and we just had a magical little, moment together. But my main sort of inspiration, I guess, or advice to anybody that wants to get into modeling is you really have to want it.
Yeah.
It's something, you have to have a plan. It's not something to take lightly, because I sort of equate it to acting, in that you never know when you could catch your big break. So you have to keep trying. There's going to be a lot of no's. There's going to be a lot of people not answering you back. There's going to be a lot of rejection, but you can't take it personally. It's just, you have to know what you want and you have to go for it.
Having a really good vision. I agree with you as far as knowing what you want, because I think what you're doing is fairly it's kind of putting yourself out there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, here, yep, I'm gonna do it. Here I am, kind of, in the completely naked in the middle of the street is kind of what you're doing. I couldn't think of any words for it, so
basically, I mean,
yeah. So I think that your vision and really wanting it, but the fact that I think you have a really clear vision. I think you do have a brand. I know you're kind of saying it depends on the high fashion, but when I see certain pictures, I'm like, yep, that fits. Yep, that fits. But this one that's up right now, I'm like, I think that's on the mark.
thank you.
Yeah, it really works for you. You have the right look for that. I think there were a couple other ones that I saw that were pretty. I think it was the first one you did with the turtleneck, and I think you had a suit coat on, and
Yeah.
I thought, yep, that fits too. So it'll be interesting to see where, if you're going to be wearing a lot of tailored clothes. I don't know,
Well,
but
I think
it seems to fit.
the sort of the look that I've been building so far has been the push, of what kind of model I want to be, and to showcase that to different agencies and to different photographers.
Mm-hmm.
Because my book being developed has only really kind of pushed that angle of, I want to be a high fashion model, because the results that I'm getting and the photographers and sort of the ideas that they have when they want to shoot with me continue to portray that, really kind of amplify that this is something that, is a right path for me, is the right kind of goal for me, is I could be a high fashion model. If I wanted to be more commercial, my book would look a lot different.
Right. I also think you don't want to confuse people of, it's kind of like I'll just give my industry. I'm a residential real estate agent.
Sure.
But if I went around and talked about investment properties, commercial real estate, once in a while a house, getting a beach house, all that, people would be confused as to what do I call her to do?
Right.
Why? What is she doing? So I tend to agree with you as far as the focus. I think that it's focused, and yeah, I would call on you for high fashion because that's what that's my reference point. That was my first initial feeling of what you were doing.
Well, thank you. It means a lot. I mean, the fact that it's getting portrayed and being, recognized. I even had somebody in an elevator today stop me and ask me if I was a model, and that made me feel really great. So I was like, yes, it's coming across. Like, I look like a model,
Thank you.
It really does make a difference, and it definitely doesn't like boost my ego. I mean, it kind of does, but I think it more boosts my confidence and like this is something that I can do, and I'm not being crazy moving to New York. Making that big leap of faith is something that could be really lucrative for me.
Right. Yeah, I did not get the feeling of yeah, everybody wants to be called they're attractive, but I really got the business sense from you of where you were going with this.
Yeah, and I think that really does delve back to, wanting it and having a plan and having those goals, because it's not something that you can just sit around and wait to fall in your lap for. It's something you actively have to be working for all the time.
Mm-hmm. So when you guys did this, how long did you plan before you decided to know that you could go? I know that you came out with your boyfriend and
right.
Yeah.
We had been planning. So the thought we'd been dating for about 7 months before we moved in together.
Mm-hmm.
And then during that time, we talked about it like, okay, we're going to do a year here in Minnesota and then
Mm-hmm.
kind of evaluate, are the next steps, like, are we going to do this? Are we going to move? And we just decided that I think it is an opportunity that we should take. And so we started saving, and the closer we got, I had an expectation of, well, I wanted to move at the end of, our lease, but then life got in the way and it ended up getting pushed back further. But it was a blessing in disguise in that we were just able to save more money and, had more opportunity to find the place that we really wanted. And we're really happy with our apartment now.
Yay. So also you planned, you did everything. You did have a plan. And the other thing is you're really quite a student of the industry.
Absolutely. Just like how I talked about knowing, why you want to shoot with a certain photographer, because you can't just, give them compliments of, wow, your photos are amazing, but knowing like, why are their photos amazing? Like what about them makes you gravitate towards them, or why do you feel this intense desire to have your photo taken by this person? I think that translates also to other aspects of the industry of why do you want to, pose for Prada? What does Prada stand for, and why is that, important to you? Or why do you want to walk for Chanel? Like asking yourself those questions kind of helps break down like what are your goals and why. Because those things matter. People are going to ask you those questions. Why do you want to model? And the answer should not be, well, people tell me I'm pretty.
Yeah, exactly. That was not your answer to me. That's why I DM'd you. I was like, no, wait a minute. She had some pretty cool stuff to tell me, because I think you were telling me that you have to wear all your own shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And yep. That's how I think we started talking, and I was like, interesting.
Yep, it's very common. I'm not sure specifically when it comes to, I've never worked or walked for Chanel or, Saint Laurent or anything like that in New York Fashion Week. Right. But any fashion show I've done or any photo shoot, it's been my shoes and my shoes only. It's just easier because having to find a pair of shoes that fits everybody.
Right.
It's complicated. There we go. Why I have all these shoes, and why I have a pair of heels in every color.
I know. I thought it was a perfect backdrop. It was perfect. I loved it. Well, Karina Dunford, I think you're going to do great. My prayers and thoughts are with you. And if you ever have friends or family in Minnesota, please have them come buy real estate with me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Likewise. Thank you.